Good evening, everyone. Okay, I'm excited to be here with you tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about toxins, and there's so much information about toxins and how it can affect your ability to lose weight that we're actually just going to be focusing tonight on the top 5 ingredients to avoid, because this is a lot of information. And then next week I'm going to be talking about GMOs, toxins in beauty products, and toxins in household chemicals. So what is the danger in toxins? Well, right now there are thousands of chemicals that are approved for use in our food, and even more that are never even tested for use in beauty products, cosmetics, and household chemicals. When toxicity builds up in the body loses its natural defense system and becomes overloaded. And part of that is because your body actually recognizes these toxins as something foreign. So it'll respond to it in the same way that it would respond to a bacteria or a virus. So it's actually using your immune system and causing a lot of inflammation. This sets off a domino effect for all kinds of subtle and not so subtle health conditions. So if you've had any of these issues, a good cleanse can often support you in feeling better again. If you've had allergies or arthritis, frequent headaches, unexplained fatigue, decreased muscle function, loss of flexibility, joint pain, circulatory problems, sluggish elimination, meaning you're constipated, low-grade infections, bloating, brain fog, body odor, respiratory congestion, asthma, frequent colds. Now, of course, for a lot of these, you're going to want to go to your physician and have your physician do proper testing. I, of course, recommend a naturopath who is a licensed physician, but they take a different approach. Instead of looking at just your symptoms, they look to find the source of those symptoms, and many times they'll test for toxins like aluminum or mercury and see if there's any high levels in your blood. A couple other things I want to add to this list. If you have like rosacea or eczema, dry, scaly skin, those can oftentimes be outward signs of inward problems. So that could also be attributed to toxins. And you might notice rashes and stuff when you use certain types of soaps or shampoos. And of course, that's your body's response to the toxins in those products. This is an amazing fact that I found on the actual National Cancer Society's website. Avoidable environmental factors linked to cancers. A proportion of cancer deaths linked to avoidable risk factors. Tobacco is 29 to 31%. Now, of course, we know there's a lot of toxins in tobacco, and many people choose not to smoke for that reason. But you also want to avoid secondhand smoke, right? Because that can be as deadly, if not more, than smoking the cigarette directly. And that's because of the chemicals that are in the paper and the chemicals in the actual tobacco. Diet, 20 to 50% of cancer deaths are linked to diet, a person's diet. Infections, bacteria and viruses. Now, why would somebody succumb to a bacteria or a virus? Now, people talk about getting the flu virus, right? But the flu virus is all around. And if you are in a store, let's say there's 100 people in a store, and 100 people are exposed to it, but only 8 people get the virus. Why did those 8 people get the virus? Well, the reason they got the virus is because their immune system can't fight it. Well, if our body is so inundated with toxins that our immune system is constantly under attack, then it wouldn't be at full force to fight off viruses and bacteria. So you might find that you're susceptible to a lot of infections. And then there's UV light with skin cancer, right? Occupational, and then pollution, air, food, and water. And this is particularly high when it comes to childhood cancers. So many of these are avoidable. And the President's Panel on Cancer in 2009, the current president put together a panel to study why the rates of cancer were increasing. And what's interesting is the rates of cancer are increasing while we have all this modern medicine. We're dumping billions of dollars into studying the cures for cancer. What they're not looking at is how they can eliminate the actual toxins that contribute to these cancers. Environmental factors including tobacco smoke, nutrition, physical activity, and exposure to environmental carcinogens are estimated to be responsible for 75 to 80% of cancer diagnosis and death here in the United States. Now, if you notice, most of those are preventable. right? Tobacco smoke, nutrition, physical activity, and exposure to environmental carcinogens, we can control those factors. And the reality is prevention works. So how do cells respond to chemical injuries? How do they respond to the toxins? If you see the cell right here to the top left, this is a cell that has had a chemical injury. So it's been exposed to a toxin, the toxin has damaged the cells. Now there's three things that can happen here. One, the cell could just die and then the remnants will be absorbed back into the body. Two, the cell repairs the DNA inside and it becomes a healthy cell. Now that would happen in an ideal situation when your cells have all the nutrients, all the nutrition that they require in order to do that type of cellular repair. Unfortunately, people who are eating diets that are high in toxins and exposed to a lot of toxins typically aren't the type of people that are also eating a nutritionally efficient diet, meaning that they are deficient in the nutrients that would be required to actually cause that repair. That's why we say supplementation is so important, to give your cells all of the nutrients that they require on an optimal for optimal performance and recovery. Or the DNA is actually going to change and your cell is going to become a cancer cell. So sometimes people will say, well, I got cancer. And the reality is it's not something you got, it's something your body itself created. And it's hard to think about it that way. With bacteria and viruses, yes, it's something that entered your body. With cancer, it's actually your cells have been damaged and changed, and they start to harm each other and form tumors. Now, our body has responses. We have actual immune cells that are responsible for targeting tumors. But again, if your body is nutritionally deficient and it doesn't have the antioxidants and the vitamins and all the other components that are necessary for healthy cells to operate in a healthy way, those cancer cells are going to have the opportunity to proliferate and to become a tumor. The other thing that we want to look at, now that's just what I'm explaining to you now is just what are the dangers of toxins, and then we're going to talk about the actual toxins that you want to avoid. And unfortunately, it's actually devastating that there are thousands of them, so I'm not going to be able to go through all of them, but next week I will be giving you some resources where you can do your own research. And that's all I've done. I've done a lot of research. I've gotten advice from physicians, and I've taken information from the web and compiled it in a way that it makes sense. The other type of toxin that we want to avoid, now these would be considered carcinogens, right? Anything that causes damage to a cell would be a carcinogen. We also want to avoid estrogenic-chemicals. Estrogenic-chemicals are chemicals that mimic estrogen in the body. Now, an increase of estrogen in the body has been conclusively linked to increases in the rates of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and tumor development. It can also cause permanent genetic effects in utero as a baby is developing, and it has been linked to an increase in obesity and an increase to insulin resistance and diabetes. Now, why do I have all of these here? Because they're all in plastic, right? Or they're in cans that are lined with BPA. BPA is one of the most common and prolific estrogenic chemicals, but there are many of them, and most of them come out of plastics. So if you can avoid plastic as much as possible, that's definitely going to reduce your exposure to estrogenic chemicals. There's also quite a few estrogenic chemicals in beauty products. Anything that says paraben, and I'll be talking about this again next week, you want to avoid because it actually increases the amount of estrogen in your system. So endocrine disrupting chemical sources, personal care products, pesticides, you know, when you're outside and you're just spraying like your ortho sprays on weed control and stuff, all of those, if they get on your skin, they're absorbed through the skin, they go into your bloodstream, they are estrogenic. Not to mention that they're damaging for the environment, because as the rain comes down, that water leaches into the lakes, rivers, and streams, and it has an effect on all of our wildlife. Plastic bottles, natural hormones, anyone who's taking a hormone supplement. In industry, plant solvents, flame retardants, you know, the stuff they put on our sheets to say that they're flame retardant, those are all estrogenic. So why is it good to get organic sheets and use organic cotton? Because those aren't laced with those chemicals. Okay, So let's talk about the top 5 ingredients that you want to avoid. Now, these are the hot 5. I call them the hot 5 because usually if any of these 5 are in a product, there's going to be other toxins in that product. If you find a product that is clean of these, usually they don't have other substances because it's a quality produced product. All of these products are used because they're cheap. Some of them trick your body into wanting more, and they preserve the shelf life. And they're labeled as, quote, less calories, or they're made to look appealing. The other day I saw somebody walking out to their car with Gatorade, and they're walking out to the car with Gatorade, and the Gatorade's blue. And I'm like, that doesn't even look natural. It's like this glowing blue. Who would want to drink that? It's not natural. It's obviously not natural, and they're obviously using chemicals to make it that color. So is it going to help you have better performance? I mean, that I don't know, but is it definitely laced with toxins? Of course. Take a look at this. We're going to go through these one by one. So if you didn't get this list down, don't worry. We're going to go by it one by one. We're going to start with high fructose corn syrup. Now, high fructose corn syrup, the corn industry has been out trying to tell us that high fructose corn syrup is safe. But when you look at this graph, what this is showing you is the growth of the consumption of high fructose corn syrup with the growth of obesity rates. And when you look at that, it is directly in alignment. So there's no doubting that this has had an effect. Now, what's the problem with high fructose corn syrup? Well, the first thing is it is absorbed instantly into the bloodstream. So as soon as you eat it, it spikes the insulin. It goes directly into the bloodstream. Your cells get a jolt of this stuff, and then you're left with an insulin spike. And the other thing with high fructose corn syrup is a lot of it ends up remaining in your bloodstream. So remember we talked last week about the effects of glucose and what happens with glucose in our bloodstream. Well, it causes all kinds of damage. So high fructose corn syrup has been linked to obesity, type 2 diabetes, exposure to additional toxins, because if any food source is using a cheap ingredient like high fructose corn syrup, of course they're going to be adding other cheap ingredients, other toxins in that food. Liver damage, raised cholesterol, and increased risk of heart disease, ADHD, ADD, depression, cellulite, and much, much more. The list goes on and on and on. All you have to do is Google dangers of high fructose corn syrup. I can tell you for myself, with my daughter who's 3 years old, personally, we do not feed her anything with high fructose corn syrup. We stay away from it. We don't buy anything with it. We don't give her candy with it. We don't do anything with it. But occasionally, if she goes to a birthday party and I'm not prepared enough, I bring her own cake and stuff like that. But if I'm not prepared enough, she might have a piece of candy. And I can tell you, I immediately notice the difference in her behavior because she's so excitable. And there's this huge excitability and then this huge major tantrum of a crash that comes from it. When she eats plain old regular raw sugar, she doesn't have that experience. How to avoid high fructose corn syrup? Well, first, you want to read the labels very carefully. It can be hidden in there. You want to look for different sources of it. It might be listed as pale corn syrup. Sometimes fructose can actually be corn syrup. So you want to really look at the ingredients carefully. You want to avoid fast food at all costs. Anything that's made at a fast food restaurant isn't going to be as healthy as food that you make yourself. And most of the foods, like the buns that they put on the hamburgers and stuff like that, those all have high fructose corn syrup in it. Buy organic. Organic foods typically do not have high fructose corn syrup because there is no version of organic high fructose corn syrup. Don't drink soda because soda is loaded with it. Choose organic sweets, desserts, or candies. So if you have to have something, choose organic. If you're, and people laugh at me when I say, if you're going to a birthday party and you have to bring a cake, bake it yourself. It doesn't take that long, and you'll know that you're having something healthy and you're serving real food to people. And you can get organic candies at Whole Foods. We just had Easter and we did an Easter bunny for my daughter, and we got an organic chocolate bunny, organic jelly beans, right? So they do have organic candies that you can get that don't have high fructose corn syrup in it, and the other ingredients I'm going to tell you about. Eat fresh. Whole, unprocessed foods don't have any high fructose corn syrup. Fruits, vegetables, grains, meat, poultry, fish, they don't have high fructose corn syrup. Number 2 on my list, hydrogenated oils. We've heard so much about this. Now, where did they even come from? Hydrogenated oils came from in the 70s. They had this big spiel that butter was bad, saturated fat was bad, right? Don't eat palm oil, don't eat coconut oil, don't eat butter because it's so bad, it's causing heart disease. So they figured out a way to make oil solid. And the way that they did it was they flooded this oil with hydrogen. So that made it solid. Well, it also made it very dangerous. Hydrogenated oils have been linked to cancers. They've been linked to, and they're known as trans fats, right? They've been linked to reproductive problems, immune suppression, chronic health problems such as obesity, cancer, bone degeneration, conclusively linked to heart disease. Now they say do not have anything with trans fats. Trans fats are banned. Do not have them, and they're trying to make these, quote, good hydrogenated oils, but the reality is they're still made in a chemistry lab, and they're not natural food. So if you want fats, stick with good old coconut oil and good old butter, good old milk fat, right, made from an actual animal. And they're saying that butter is actually good because it's so high in certain vitamins. And of course, you're not going to eat like tons of it every day, but the amount that you do eat, it could definitely be beneficial. An increase in trans fats also throws off your ratio of omega oils. Now, omega-3 to omega-6 typically is 1:1, but in the Western diet, it's typically 1:20 or 1:50. And that high level of omega-6 is very much responsible for high levels of inflammation in the body. It causes an increase in cardiovascular disease, depression, cancer, Alzheimer's, rheumatoid arthritis, and diabetes. To correct it, you want to stay away from all processed foods and foods cooked in vegetable oils, and increase your intake of omega-3 oils. So basically stay away from fried foods and stay away from processed foods, and definitely stay away from fast food. Third ingredient on there, monosodium glutamate. Okay, if you ever go through a drive-thru window, you're definitely getting a heavy dose of this. It's highly, highly addictive. Now, years ago, I used to think Chick-fil-A was a premium fast food restaurant, right? Like if we were out traveling and we were going to go somewhere, I would say, oh, let's go to Chick-fil-A. And I thought that it was safe. And then I actually looked at the ingredients, and even their chicken nuggets have monosodium glutamate in it. And what made me actually look at the ingredients was I found that after I ate the food, I would get super, super tired. And for me, that's the symptom of eating MSG. Super tired, drowsy, kind of mental fogginess. So MSG is highly addictive, and it was designed to actually increase the sensitivity of the taste buds and the communication to the brain. And it opens up the brain-blood barrier, which is incredibly scary. Your brain-blood barrier is designed to keep toxins out of your brain, to keep bacteria and viruses out of your brain. This actually opens that up, which is why the symptoms often have to do neurological symptoms. And it makes you eat more. So it affects the ability, it enhances the flavor, and it reduces the satiation response, meaning it reduces your body's ability to know when it's full, so you keep on eating. So what are the dangers of MSG? Well, it affects the brain-blood barrier. It's contributed to obesity, eye damage, depression, fatigue, headaches, and migraines. Again, these are all neurological, right, because it affects that blood-brain barrier. Chest pain and difficulty breathing, breathing problems, nausea, rapid heartbeat, drowsiness, weakness, burning sensations, loss of concentration, brain damage, and lesions. A lot of people who have sensitivities to MSG who are eating this on a daily basis, once they cut out all of the processed food, they have these amazing health recoveries. Their skin changes, their head is better, they're less foggy, just absolutely incredible. So look for MSG in any of your food. The other thing, they're now starting to label it DSG for disodium glutamate. It's the same thing, so you want to look for DSG, disodium glutamate, as well. Any of these glutamates definitely you want to avoid. Artificial sweeteners. Oh boy, we could spend a whole week on these alone, on artificial sweeteners. Artificial sweeteners have actually been proven to increase appetite. So the reason that they came out in the first place was to supposedly assist diabetics, right? And to help people not have insulin fluctuations from sugar. But now what they're finding is that artificial sweeteners actually do affect insulin levels, and your insulin levels do increase when you take them. But the cells don't actually get any glucose. So insulin is spiked, but there's no glucose for the cells, so it can damage the actual insulin receptors on the cells. It's linked to certain forms of cancer. It alters the ability to absorb nutrients. New studies just came out about Splenda that have conclusively suggested that Splenda changes the ability of the small intestine to absorb nutrients. So it actually changes the gap between the cells, and it changes the way that the cells are able to absorb vitamins. Very, very scary, right? It's stored as toxins in the body. It increases obesity, decreases ability to lose weight, and it can affect energy. So artificial sweeteners you want to definitely stay away from. The last is artificial colors. Now, what are the dangers of food dyes? Consider that many of these food dyes have actually been banned in other countries. And they've been banned because they've been linked to cancer, ADHD, ADD, allergies, hypersensitivity, asthma, hyperactivity. Many of these are what are called neurotoxins and excitotoxins. And what that means is that it has an effect in your brain and an effect on the nerve cells and how they connect together. So a neurotoxin can actually damage the nerve cells and how they communicate with each other. An excitotoxin is one that acts as a stimulant in the body and causes all kinds of stimulant effects, including effects on the adrenal system. So it can cause spikes in adrenaline, and that can be a constant, over time, experience that's happening. In addition, artificial colors have been linked to a whole other slew of problems. Now, some of these have already been banned, and they've been banned because they were found to be linked to certain types of cancers, which is really, really scary, right? They were in the marketplace. We were using them for a number of years. Then people got sick. Then they decided to ban them. Well, I don't know about you, but I personally do not want to be the food industry's guinea pig. So I personally stay away from these, right? Because I don't want to be the person that develops some type of disease that now they've linked to some food coloring that we're not using anymore. Now, why should you buy organic? I'm going to tell you in a couple minutes a little bit more about organic. But one thing to know is that if you're not buying organic oranges, the outside of the orange is actually dyed with a food coloring that is not approved for ingestion, right? It's just approved to color the outside of the skins. Now, if you're like me and you cook and you ever use orange zest and you're using some of that rind, you want to make sure you're using organic oranges for that, so that you're not ingesting that food coloring. Additional additives. So those are my top 5. And typically, if you see any of those top 5 in a food, you want to stay away from it. One, because you don't want to consume that, but also because it's going to have other stuff in it. Now, in addition to those top 5, these are the other ones that I recommend staying away from. Sodium nitrates and nitrites. These are often in cold cuts and in cured meats like bacon, but now you can easily buy uncured bacon. I buy it all the time that doesn't have any nitrates in it. It's nitrates and nitrites have been linked to certain types of cancer and cardiovascular disease. Brominated vegetable oil, this is oftentimes in soft drinks, and I know a lot of the companies have taken them out of the sports drinks. It's linked to an increase in triglycerides and cholesterol. It can damage the liver, testicles, thyroid, heart, and kidneys. And benzoate preservatives, also very dangerous. Benzoate preservatives have been linked to hyperactivity, asthma, rhinitis, dermatitis, tumors, and these can affect estrogen balance and levels. So if you see a food that's preserved with BHT, BHA, or TBHQ, you want to stay away from it. If we went to the McDonald's website right now, you would see TBHQ and BHT in almost every food item. Same thing, Burger King, Wendy's, Chick-fil-A, they all use these, right? And TBHQ is also an anti-foaming agent, I believe, as well. Caramel color is actually produced with ammonia many times. It's carcinogenic. They make it seem like it's something natural, but the way that they process it's not, so you want to stay away from that. Unless it's an organic product and they're using an organic caramel color, then that would be okay. Potassium bromate is carcinogenic. It's banned in many countries. It's not used in many foods anymore, but we still do see it in some things. Azodicarbonamide is an asthmatic. Now, this got a lot of press recently because this is in a lot of bread products. Nature's Made, Subway, you know, these companies that were using them in their bread products as like fluffers. And this is a chemical that's used in yoga mats to make the yoga mat spongy. And this is what we're ingesting, right? So you want to stay away from that. And anything that says reduced calorie or low fat. Because if they're cutting something out, it means they're shoving something in. And if they're taking something good out, they're putting something bad in. So there's no such thing as like a good low-fat product unless it's naturally low fat, right? So if it's naturally low in fat, other than I would say probably skim milk, because all they do is, you know, pull the fat off of the top of that if you're getting organic version. But things that are processed to be low fat or reduced calorie typically have lots of other junk that have been put in. Okay, so how do you avoid food toxins? Well, first you want to buy organic. Now there's lots of naysayers out there, and of course a lot of press is pushed out there by farms and big agra that doesn't, you know, produce organic foods. And what they'll tell you is the nutritional value of certain foods that are organic aren't any different than those that are not organic. And that may be true. But what is different is your exposure to toxins. So if you consider, let's say, apples, right? So an apple tree is sprayed with 10, 12, 15 different pesticides and fungicides. When it rains, all of that leaches down to the ground. Well, where do trees get their nutrients from? They get it from the ground. So now the pesticides are in the soil, in the water, in the ground, and the tree is siphoning that up through every cell and pushing it out to the fruit, right? So can your fruit and your vegetables have pesticide residue inside of them? Of course they can, right? Because that water that's carrying it can come to it. So what's the answer? Buy organic. Organic foods do not use pesticides. They don't use unnatural fertilizers. And you want to buy organic foods to reduce your exposure to certain toxins. It's also going to reduce your exposure to GMOs, which we're going to talk about next week. Buy whole foods that have not been processed. Now, I'm not saying whole foods from Whole Foods. I'm not promoting Whole Foods, the store, but whole foods that have not been processed. So when you buy a whole fruit or a whole carrot or a whole piece of celery, you'll know that there's not food toxins in there, right? And you'll know that with organic. If it's not organic, it could have all kinds of wax and other substances on the outside that are trying to make it look pretty. Well, didn't nature make it pretty enough, right? Is a little worm bite going to be bad? And actually those little worm bites are actually really good for you because the plant has actual natural mechanisms to fight those invasions, and those are phytonutrients that are active that you'll be eating. Buy organic eggs and poultry. If you're not buying organic poultry, then you're buying from a poultry mass producer. They're feeding them very cheap feed to just get them fat fast, and there's a whole other dirty side to that story. The same thing with organic eggs, right? You want eggs from chickens that have been running around in a field that are fed organic grains, and are not going to be exposed to toxins. If they're not being fed organic food, if you're not buying organic eggs or organic poultry, then they could be eating food that's also laced with pesticides and fertilizer residue, that type of stuff. Avoid processed, pre-packaged foods. That's going to reduce your exposure to toxins by like 90%, foodborne toxins. Because if you're eating whole organic foods, then there's no exposure to toxins there at all. If you're buying stuff that comes in a box or it's wrapped in plastic, well, already, if it's wrapped in plastic, you're exposed to the toxins in the plastic. But then what else was used in the processing of it? And what chemicals are they using? What additives are they using to put on it? And you want to look up the ingredients. If you don't know what it is, research it before you buy it. Unfortunately, we cannot trust our food. And a lot of people think, well, what's the FDA for? And that's a great question. That's a whole nother discussion. But I can tell you they're not here to protect you from everything that you eat. And was that their original mission? I don't know. But currently there are thousands of food ingredients on the generally recognized as safe list that some of them are being investigated right now because they're proven that they're not safe. And why are they in our food supply? So the question is, do you want to be the guinea pig for that? Personally, I don't, right? I don't want to eat stuff that could make me sick. I want to be healthy and have a lot of vitality. So if that's your choice, then you want to eat organic, and you want to choose foods that are whole foods, that are not processed, and that have not been pre-packaged. Ideally, if you can get local produce from organic farms, do it. Grass-fed beef, absolutely. It's hormone-free, it's antibiotic-free, it's pesticide-free. You're getting cow, beef the way that it was meant to be. Not processed on a big farm, fed a bunch of grains. Cows weren't meant to eat soy. So just like when you're not meant to eat something, your body responds with inflammation. Same thing with cows. When they're not meant to eat something, their body responds to inflammation. So then you're eating that inflamed meat that's loaded with all of the residuals of the lifetime of what it's been fed. So definitely eat organic. So next week, we're going to be talking about GMOs, beauty products, and household chemicals. So this week was food toxins. You can tell that the mode of it is eat natural foods the way nature intended, not the way man created in a chemistry lab. And you're going to have much greater health, much greater vitality, and you're going to avoid those top 5 chemicals that have caused so many of today's health problems. So that's it for tonight, everyone. Have a great night, and I hope you got a lot of value out of today, and I hope this helps you have a healthy and vital life.